A very good morning to you. It's always a pleasure to have you with us on this 17th day of March. Welcome to the broadcast. You're watching Morning Express. My name is Jesse Rogers.
Trix Ingado. Today on the show, we take a look far from the very latest in the happenings in the country and farther beyond. We shall be taking a look at the health sector, see how the Red Cross has been handling those people with special needs and pre-existing conditions. We shall be having Health Watch, a special feature by Dr. Mercy Korir, set up for you, as well as what's happening in the education sector. The students, the kids are about to go into the examination, KCSE and KCPE, and apparently the long holiday that is coming on. How will they be handling that, and shall we be facing a similar problem as to what we faced previously after they were away for 10 long months? Do stay tuned for that and much, much more.
Well, that truly is a long holiday. Roughly 7 weeks, the students will have a break. So we'll definitely get to interrogate some of the complexities around the education sector, also bearing in mind some schools are complaining about the late disbursement of funds, even as we prepare for the examinations, which for some group of the candidates will be starting as from next week. All that right here on Morning Express, so do stay tuned right here. We just want to take a look at what has been covered on the dailies, but before we take a look at what's happening locally, let's cross borders. Take a look at what has been highlighted on various pages on international news. Let's begin with our neighbors, Uganda, right here. On the Daily Monitor, of course, there we have it, some of the stories emerging from Uganda. Landlords stare at empty buildings as the COVID impact bites in Uganda. This is all to do with the Central Business District, where a number of those shopping arcades are either half occupied or not occupied at all, where the occupancy rate stands at 2/3 of the total space. Some of the challenges that seem to be facing various countries, even as the court dismisses the torture claims by 49 jailed Bobby supporters. That's the latest, even after Bobby Wine was arrested, as he initiated demonstrations to actually push for the release of his compatriots who were actually held during the elections. Let's cross over to the Citizen. What's happening in Tanzania? One of the main stories about 3 men involved in trafficking of 74 chameleons to Austria are arraigned at Kisutu. Of course, more emphasis given on this particular story, and those 3 men could be facing 2 charges, including involvement in the trade of government trophies and receiving those chameleons. Some of the other stories, apart from that particular one on the question of where the president is, as you can see, other emerging trends from Tanzania. Over to Rwanda. Let's take a look at what's happening there. Okay, Rwandan strong centers for first of 2-phase vaccine jab. Of course, Rwanda in the leading pole position in terms of effecting the vaccines. And they just take a look at the journey so far, even as Ethiopia rolls out the COVID-19 jab. And the WHO and AstraZeneca say there is no evidence linking the vaccine to blood clotting. Of course, that's the latest emerging around the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, even as various countries continue distributing this particular jab. Over to the East African. Let's take a look at what's happening there. It's all about Ethiopia, who have just rolled out the COVID-19 jab in the backdrop of what I just mentioned, the WHO saying there is no link between the blood clot and the vaccine itself. Rwanda easing the COVID-19 curbs, and this is following a drop in new infections, even as we are noting an increase in infections, over 1,000 positive infections right here in Kenya just yesterday. Test of the times, if you might call it that way. Over to CNN World News. Let's take a look at some of the stories highlighted here. US and Japan express concern over China's aggressive actions during the first trip by Biden's top diplomat. Of course, the diplomatic ties between this quote-unquote superpower countries, even as Myanmar's military is killing peaceful protesters A lot of emphasis given on that, following what exactly happened in that particular country. And we'll definitely continue highlighting some of the developments happening on the international scene. But let's talk local. And at times, politics is referred to as local. And let's just take a look at some of the stories highlighted here on the front page of the Standard. We have the secrets of Nairobi Dusit terror attack. It's all about the revelations, and the masterminds of the Dusit D2 terror attack made 140 calls to execute their plan. Most to collaborators in Somalia, that's according to the documents which were filed by Kenya at the Hague court. Now, this emerged a day after Nairobi opted out of that particular maritime case against Somalia, where it stands to lose up to 113 kilometers squared or in the Indian Ocean. One of the top stories right there on the front page, but also about politics. It has been covered on the front page how Raila, how Raila is lining up his cards for the next big fight. It's all about the post-BBI strategy, as the Orange Party leader seems to be silently targeting key individuals from regions to consolidate his support ahead of the 2022 election. All this and more in the Standard. Let's take a look at what's highlighted on the front page of the Daily Nation. It's about President Uhuru Kenyatta whipping Raila and rivals into one line. And this is what they've mentioned: stop the squabbling and focus on the big picture. President Kenyatta told leaders of 6 political parties as he rallied them to go into elections united and to prevent the violence like was witnessed in Matungu, Nakuru and Kabuchai. Among those 6 leaders, of course, ODM leader Raila Odinga, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka, KANU party leader Gideon Moi, as well as Musalia Mudavadi and Charity Ngilu of the NARC party, who is the leader. Now, let's start with the main story that has been covered on the Standard. Even as I introduce my panelist for the next 1 hour, I'm definitely joined by Kariuki Ngunjiri right here in studio. He is a political analyst. Many thanks for your time and good morning.
Yes, good morning, Jesse Rogers.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to be on KTN News this morning.
Well, many thanks for making time. I know you're a political analyst, but we'll definitely take a look at non-political stories as well. And I'm sure you're locked and loaded to give us your input on that. Speaking of non-political stories, the front page is touching on some of the revelations that have been made at the Hague court, touching on the dispute between Kenya and Somalia on that particular maritime case. But this time round, some of the documents have touched on the Dusit D2 terror attack, where roughly 140 calls were made to collaborators in Somalia. What's your take on this, even before we talk about the maritime dispute itself?
Yes, first of all, this expresses the concerns of Kenya on some of its strategic security interests, even as it approaches the maritime case. I think the Kenyan government yesterday was as blatant as the citizens would expect a sovereign nation to exercise its authority over affairs that it thinks compromises its security interests. And I think that is why at the International Court of Justice yesterday, the Nairobi team did express its concerns on how the citizenry of Somalia and how the nation state of Somalia has been used as a catalyst, for example, on the Dusit terror attack that happened in Kenya. So this is a good base for an argument when approaching the maritime case border issue.
Okay, that definitely building up on that particular case where Kenya is arguing in order to deny Somalia's claim to territorial waters, and it listed this terrorism issue as one of the reasons its citizens are at risk. Of course, all this in the backdrop of that particular maritime dispute at the ICJ between Kenya and Somalia. And also on page 9, it highlights on the fishing rights on the line in that particular border case where the Mombasa and Lamu residents might actually be cut off from access to basic source of livelihood that involves fishing. So this is also highlighted as one of the reasons Somalia shouldn't have their way in terms of this maritime dispute. Talk to us about the intrigues that we've seen break down over the last few days. The Attorney General has been quite vocal on this particular issue. What's your take on this?
You see, let me start my opening statement by saying that Kenya should not give even an inch, no matter how the International Court of Justice rules on this case. You have seen in the past a case between Peru and Chile where Peru was granted access over some of the territorial boundaries of Chile. You've seen a case on Nicaragua and Colombia. The court, yes, has jurisdiction of affairs concerning disputes among its countries, but doesn't have any tool for enforcement. It would be going against what we believe as a sovereign country for Kenya to agree into the demands of, for example, Somalia, and give part of what is believed to be part of its strategic interest area. One thing that I know is that, Jesse, there are other strategic interests in the world on this case. And I know that from what we saw in 2019 during the Somalia Oil and Gas Conference in London, whereby Somalia did express its interest to auction part of the oil gas area within the maritime border disputed area. And that is where Kenya now decided to wake up, because as things were going, Somalia had already taken its final decision on this case. But again, we also see countries like the United States, whom we have signed various cooperation agreements. For example, we have an agreement with the United States that we will coordinate and cooperate in the war against terror. The United States is supporting Kenya in this. France, which also holds interest here on the Total company, is also part of the interested party in this. I also see Norway, a country that has a strategic interest supporting Somalia. So in this case, it also speaks to, for example, the number of judges and what is expected as the verdict. I might have seen this coming, Mr. Rogers, because the number of judges that were previously in the case, and you could remember it took, I think it was David Matanga to realize that one of the judges was having a descent of a Somali person, and that case would have been in a prejudice.
Okay.
So I feel that in this case, like we have seen in the past cases, Kenya should stand its ground, and because Somalia has literally expressed its unwillingness to cooperate with Kenya in terms of the war against terror, in the piracy business that has been happening across the coast. And also, we have seen Somalia banning the exportation of cat, that is a miraa, to Somalia, citing concerns of what they say is the spread of the coronavirus. Whereas Ethiopia continues to export the same to Somalia. I think Farmajo has taken an approach that expresses his hard power on Kenya, not realizing that Kenya is a more advanced and has a more, Kenya is a bigger sister or brother in this case.
All right.
And I think that the President of the Republic of Kenya,
okay,
when he hosted Mr. Bihi, the President of Somaliland, did not in any way, like Somalia claims, interfere with the internal affairs of Somalia. By any chance,
all right,
in 1991, the country of Somaliland was declared sovereign, and it moved itself out of the pact with Somalia that has been previously brokered by the British government then.
Okay.
And we have the description of what a nation state is, Mr. Rogers, different from what the Somali president argues. We have the Montevideo Convention that happened in Uruguay that says if a country has a territorial boundary, and which I think Kenya recognizes Somaliland for, has people who are legitimately accepting the government of the day, a nation that has a government, a nation that has existing constitutional thresholds that rule those people, then that nation is recognized as a nation. So we have not interfered as a country with the affairs of Somalia in any way. I think for strategic interest, it is important for Kenya to stand its ground, and particularly for international relations and for cooperation in future, even in trade, and also for political interest. You must have seen the re-election agenda of President Farmajo was much at stake because of this case. So that's why he decided to coin the story and decide that he's not going to follow logic and what the decision of the International Court will be. So this must be one of our most decisive moments as a country. We must not give an inch to nobody. And if the court rules for Somalia, it doesn't have any enforcement jurisdiction or powers. So this is something that we can be able to stand our ground and not just be coerced to accept. We cannot risk.
But we're definitely neighbors. Yes, we might not have to risk this, but I mean, deliberations might be the way to actually sort this particular issue out. We had tried it earlier on, we had approached the African Union, but the talks seemed to break down. And hence, Somalia making their way to the ICJ, raising these issues around the dispute on maritime. But be that as it may, let's just take a look at one of the other stories that seems to be touching on various countries. It's on page 2, and it states why countries are stopping the AstraZeneca vaccine. As you well know, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is in distribution in the country, but some of the European countries had stopped the rollout due to a couple of issues, reports around blood clots due to this particular vaccine. But the latest from the World Health Organization and the European Medicines Agency shows that the vaccine does not cause the blood clots, and people should actually continue to be immunized. But be that as it may, it does definitely dent the public confidence in the AstraZeneca vaccine. We've seen the Kenyan government come out and say that it is safe, that Kenyans should actually come out and be vaccinated. What's your take on this? Because many might argue that if an European country stops distributing the vaccine in order to investigate it, then as an African country, as Kenyans, we should actually be cautious.
I think this is coming up as an issue that is bridging the concerns over what is known as the crisis within the European Union. You've seen the number of countries that are first to reject this vaccine and advise its citizens against it. But I think because it must have been sanctioned by the World Health Organization, which is the body that is mandated to oversee over all matters concerning health across the world, then I think that is why countries even within the continent of Africa and Asia decided to believe in this vaccine. You see, we cannot trust on the internal fights within an union like the European Union and yet ignore what those that have the capacity to advise us on the merits and demerits of the vaccine in the name of the World Health Organization. And that is why I believe that because, and of course this is some of the fights that we have seen within who is first to bring this vaccine, which country is first to procure, that sort of Cold War has also preceded some of the challenges that we are seeing. This could be one of the worst moments, for example, for a country like the United Kingdom, which has already left the European Union through Brexit. And I feel that some of these countries could not be genuine to be saying that the vaccine, for example, is bringing blood clots, whereas the World Health Organization has not advised the world otherwise.
Yeah.
But assuming that it was true that this AstraZeneca vaccine is having some side effects, then we would be asking the question of, could a medication be perfect in all human species, Mr. Rogers? It is biologically correct that sometimes these medications could have reactions on different people because of different biological reasons within their bodies.
True, true.
Has it been tested and has it been ratified that the vaccine is causing blood clots across different races, across people within different ecosystems? For example, people in different environments.
And age groups as well.
And age groups as well, in that cradle.
Okay.
So what is the logic behind this argument? Again, this is a question that I posed when I was last on this interview, and I'm still posing it on the issue of this vaccine. We have been told that it is not 100% secure, that people now drop the guard and stop wearing masks and observing social distance. So perhaps this could be some of the questions, even on that one of the blood clots and countries banning the vaccine, that the World Health Organization needs to step in and bring a conclusive answer on some of these concerns.
So, of course, many people are seeking answers, but most of the countries haven't really banned the vaccine. They've just suspended it, waiting investigations into it. But WHO have pronounced themselves on this particular matter. But the bigger question is the low uptake of the vaccine within the country. Definitely the government gave its projections, the goals of the number of people to be vaccinated, but as of last week, we had barely hit the 10,000 mark. What might be the issue around this? Questions around poor planning, perhaps, questions around people not being too conducive to the vaccine. They're afraid to get the vaccine. These questions have a reason. What say you about the low uptake of the vaccine within the country?
Let me tell you, in Kenya, we have a situation whereby politicians are held in high regard. You have not seen the President of the Republic of Kenya publicly taking the vaccine.
But we've seen governors.
Or even the deputy, leave alone the governors. You see, the person at the top, who is the President, who at times is interpreted as the person who holds the interest of the people that he governs and leads. So if the President has not been seen in public being injected with the vaccine, of course, this brings a shadow of doubt to some of those that think that perhaps this vaccine, if those that are at the top of government, the President, Deputy President, and cabinet ministers, people expected that they should have seen, for example, the President in State House inviting all those political leaders and then all of them sitting down, being injected with the vaccine. And I believe that way the people would have welcomed the vaccine with open hands. But as it seems, without that strategic gesture from the leadership, then I feel that the people are a bit skeptical, which is, of course, genuine. And you know the culture that we have in Kenya of people believing the political gospel every time.
Okay, so public confidence might be an issue.
There is a low-spirited public confidence, which I feel needs to be boosted, by the way, I should tell you, by the leadership of the country. And I expect for Kenyans to, for example, get a mass vaccination campaign and accept it. I think there needs to be some sort of charging, like we have seen in the past, when people, for example, are taking things like Huduma numbers. So this is something that needs the leadership of this country to push, if at all they want the numbers to go up.
Okay.
And I believe even for the Kenyan people who feel that they are at risk, and those that are at the front line, for example, people working in hospitals, crowded areas, teachers and what have you, those ones needs to be very, very, very proactive on this case.
And actually pushing that particular issue about civic education on the importance of the vaccine. even though we're in the third wave of the coronavirus, the positivity rate is definitely going up. Just yesterday, we did record a high number of COVID-19 positive Kenyans. What say you about the third wave? As you well know, the BBI agenda has definitely taken a short break. Political gatherings have been banned. What say you about us going forward? Should we actually push our citizens in terms of civic education? Yet we've done it over the year in order to still wear the mask, maintain hygiene and all that. Well, what's your take?
Yes, I think the government needs to invest on a very elaborate campaign to educate the masses that this vaccine does not have 100% efficacy. And thus, if you drop the guard, then like you have seen, and for the past few days, you've seen even prominent people who are succumbing to this COVID-19. So the disease has not yet gone away from us until a time when we don't know when. So it is important that the government does inform and educate the citizenry on the way forward and the importance of continuing to take precaution on this matter of COVID-19.
Okay, well, it's also a personal initiative as well. The government definitely shouldn't have to force you to wear a mask or maintain hygiene as well. So please do follow the guidelines, bearing in mind this new strain has definitely far-reaching symptoms that might be heavier than the previous strains. But let's cross over to a story that has irked Kenyans, especially on social media. It's all about the Members of Parliament trip to Dubai amid rising cost of living that caused quite an outrage. We had a story on this particular issue yesterday where Members of Parliament will get about 1.28 million since they're receiving an allowance of 143,000 per day. 16 Members of Parliament actually attended that training in Dubai in what seemed to have turned out as a costly trip that is funded by the taxpayer. Our reporter Murimi Mwangi put a spotlight on the controversial Dubai trip and tells us why parliamentary leadership insists that the trip was necessary and the cost notwithstanding.
Dubai has for the better part of the day been the top trending topic on Twitter, under threat of vicious attack on the Kenyan parliament. And it has all to do with this post of 4 pictures by Nyali legislator Mohammed Ali, titled Dubai with other members of parliament, attending masterclass training in public financial management and administration, attracting the wrath of netizens questioning why the training had to happen abroad. Amid the tough economic times in Kenya, the raging COVID-19 pandemic with newly discovered strains, and the government's supposed cost-cutting austerity measures that also include reduced foreign travel. So how much might the Kenyan parliament have spent on this trip? And how necessary was it to fly the MPs to Dubai? KTN News has established that the 16 legislators drawn from Finance, Budget, Public Accounts, Public Investments and Special Funds Committee have been in Dubai since Thursday last week and jet back on Saturday. A single legislator's per diem per night, inclusive of meals and accommodation abroad, is approximately 143,000 Kenya shillings. This cumulatively for the 16 MPs for the 9 days they will be abroad translates to 20.6 million Kenya shillings. A return ticket to Dubai on business for single passenger on Kenya's national carrier Kenya Airways is roughly 125,000, translating to 2 million Kenya shillings for the 16 legislators in Dubai, bringing the total expenditure of the trip to approximately 22.6 million Kenya shillings. And the figure could be higher because the MPs are likely accompanied by other parliamentary staff members. But National Assembly Clerk Michael Sialai dismissed the online outcry as unnecessary. Sialai told KTN News that the Dubai training is tailor-made for MPs serving in money-related committees and is meant to empower participants with in-depth and comprehensive knowledge of the theoretical and practical aspects of financial management. The participants, he said, have been dealing with complex issues touching on finance, including balanced budgeting, debt ceiling, and value for money auditing, and that Dubai-based Zoe Talent Solutions was hosting the important training. Sentiments echoed by Ali, one of the meeting participants, who said Kenya's current situation is chiefly as a result of poor public finance management, and that they are in Dubai to learn how to become better overseers of Kenyans' hard-earned taxes. Ali adding that the criticism against Parliament is what he claims are double standards by the executive, which he says has reduced the 12th Parliament to the worst in history, full of sycophants and brokers. And with Parliament recently on the citizens' firing line for sanctioning several legislations that raised fuel costs and other basic commodities, the bashing over this and other trips is certainly poised to continue as the government fights to justify its cost-cutting measures. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News.
Well, in the midst of the economic tribulations we're facing in the country, the members of parliament did definitely receive backlash, even though they argued that it's all about capacity building for the members in the backdrop of the challenges in overseeing Kenya's hard-earned taxes. But many questions have arisen. Did these particular members of parliament have to go to Dubai to actually get these lessons on capacity building at such a time? Gunjiri, it's an intricate balance. What say you? We definitely don't want to be emotional about this particular topic. So let's approach it from a factual point of view.
Yes, of course, we don't want to be emotional about it. And MPs are entitled to classes or master class of public finance management as civil servants, people who have been entrusted with CDF and anything else. So first of all, they are entitled to that. However, how do we approach this? The question is, could have the trainer come to Kenya? And how would have that, for example, made a difference on the content, on the quality of what the trainer could submit in Kenya as opposed to MPs going to Dubai? So that's a logical question, because already the taxpayer has been taxed on fuel, and you know the rising cost of fuel will have an effect on consumer goods going forward.
Yeah.
So the logic behind that visit comes at a time when Kenya is experiencing hard economic times. So this is interpreted as mockery to the poor and leveraging Kenyans who are barely living from hand to mouth. And I believe this is a strategic blunder by some of these members of parliament who goes now in the minds of Kenyans as a people who do not care about the concerns of the people they represent. In 2015, when President John Magufuli came into power, he did exercise executive powers to ban unnecessary foreign trips. And he said, if an official is going to visit a foreign country for any official duties, they must not be, for example, the number of people we see carrying all those teams within those visits,
All right,
where we see all of them getting allowances, for example. They said that the government will only take care of a few members of the government, perhaps in cabinet, to go for those international meetings and what have you. And these ones, the allowances that they are supposed to be given could also be cut. That is taking strict measures to ensure that the economy hits back to where it was.
Okay.
So this could be some of the biggest lessons that a poor country like Kenya, which wants to govern itself with the standards of a rich nation, can learn from Tanzania.
But the question is all about timing and if it was truly needed. On one hand, We have the parliamentary leadership and this MPs actually saying this is important, capacity building to actually help us discharge our duties of oversight and representation. But on the other side, taking a look at some of the tweets put on the social media by Kenyans, they're asking how exactly will this help manage the ever-swelling and ballooning wage bill, wastage, major corruption scandals. So you see, it's a sharp contrast between what the leaders say and what Kenyans seem to think about this particular trip.
You see, this is a recurring question. This is not the issue of benchmark, where you go to Dubai to go and see how roads are constructed or how Burj Khalifa is constructed or the whatever transport systems works in Dubai. This is a concern to Kenyans because members of parliament are going to Dubai to be trained in Dubai hotels, paying those bills and what have you.
So the question is, wouldn't that have happened in Kenya?
We have empty hotels in Nairobi, and I don't want to appear like I'm feeling any jealousy for the members of parliament perhaps to take a trip. But then let me ask you, or rather let me pose a question. Why does it happen every time that even when MPs or other public officials are traveling to foreign countries, as a group, we'll have to take business class? I mean, it's expensive. For example, taking a trip to the United States in a business class in some of these big airlines, Jesse, could cost up to about 500,000, while a normal economy class could cost from something between 80,000 Kenyan shillings to 100,000. So that is fourfold. So why does it, won't those people reach to the United States if they boarded economy class and not business class? I mean, why don't we cut cost on literally everything if we can tax an important commodity such as fuel is such a high margin?
Okay. Well, definitely so many questions arising around the fuel tax and the prices that have just been set effective Monday. But let's cross over to politics right now. And on page 4 of The Standard, they interrogate Raila's political cards after BBI. Of course, this in the run-up to the 2022 general election, where political analysts say handshake and Mount Kenya support is key in ensuring the former premier wins his presidency. And of course, Ngunjiri, this coming in the backdrop of the alliance that seems to have cut out Raila Odinga from his traditional allies, the NASA coalition, the figureheads of Mudavadi and Ford Kenya's Moses Wetangula and the like. So he seems to be looking at new options, especially after the BBI. We have a couple of leaders quoted here from Muhisa Kitui, Kivutha Kibwana, Anne Waiguru, and Joseph Ole Lenku. Talk to us about the importance of coalitions running up to the general election and what next move for Raila Odinga.
I think as we approach the coming general election, various players within the political circles will be playing cards. Others will be defecting, joining others, and we'll see various exchanges. And of course, at this time, that is where we have what we normally popularly call give and take. Give and take is a formula that if I'm going to call you into my team, for example, what am I going to gain from that? It could be that I am being promised a position of a cabinet minister, chief administrative secretary of nomination within the next government. So it is always a bargaining moment for various leaders, especially those who don't have interest for the presidency. For this one, I believe that it is the normal activities that we normally see before a general election. And I think that it is always a strategic imperative for any political leader to bank his money on people whom he believes or she believes can be able to deliver on behalf of him or her within any region. So the biggest question is not on who, or rather not on whether Raila Odinga is approaching several leaders, even from Mount Kenya like I have seen. The biggest question is, who is Raila Odinga approaching? I mean, you could be approaching someone who cannot be able to deliver even votes within their constituencies. So the biggest question, even for other political players, who are these people? And from what I can see, or rather I can see on your standard newspaper today, I see people like Anne Waiguru, governor of Kirinyaga, Mukisa Kitui, Kivutha Kibwana, and the rest. So what political capital would such leaders bring to the table of Raila? I have always said that Raila Odinga sometimes is ignorant of some very simple facts. Because at this point, when we are talking of people organizing themselves ahead of 2022, I think Raila Odinga has over-relied on the handshake to deliver him what he believes will be a through pass from an endorsement from President Uhuru Kenyatta. However, it seems that even if President Uhuru Kenyatta is going to endorse someone, all chances, like we can predict, does not favor Raila. I can bet that it might probably not be Raila Odinga.
But these very leaders all of them seem to want to distance themselves from
you have
endorsement.
Seen, you saw what happened in State House, even when Raila Odinga was around. He's a partner in handshake, but who is being given the opportunity to read the agreement of that meeting. So I can almost tell you that Raila Odinga is banking his cards on the wrong bet. And it is for him to reorganize his house. Well, I believe that he could even survive better by approaching the people directly, like the deputy president has been, while bypassing the tribal kingpins, who at times do not represent what the people on the ground feel. And I think the former NASA coalition could have been strengthened if, for example, they brought more people on board, and Raila Odinga was able to consolidate that. So if that unity is not there, so how is he going to quote these other guys, bring them on board into ODM or whichever alliances, and then brand them into a replacement of the former guys who have been long-serving political careers, and then bank on them as a fresh start. So I think some of these things could be strategic blunders. But for Raila Odinga, I think for him, it is not the handshake that is going to deliver him what he wants for 2022. It is banking his money on the people of Kenya, going to them, while maintaining relationship with the leadership of various regional interests, so that he can be able to, for example, build what I call a grassroots organizational infrastructure, which, by the way, if you observe what the president has been able to do for all that period, he has been able to build that while maintaining a relationship with the regional leaders.
Regional politics plays a crucial role in the run-up to the 2022 general election. So the Standard definitely does interrogate Raila Odinga's next move. It's also keen to note that ODM definitely did distance itself from the handshake and 2022 politics, saying the handshake is definitely just about the BBI. They're not banking on any endorsement going forward. We've seen various leaders actually distance themselves from that, but it's all about the race to 2022 presidency. And make sure you grab yourself a copy for more information on that. Allow us to take a short break. When we come back, we'll interrogate Ruto's journey out of Jubilee, even as the Jubilee wars play out in the open, and DP's allies tell Uhuru, you don't have powers to eject Ruto. That's according to the Standard and The Nation. Stay with us. Much more after this break.